Hello, lovely people. Welcome to today's live edition. To all those watching recorded or live, today is another edition, and in this edition, we are coming to talk about how to learn one of the most difficult languages in the world, that is Chinese language. Join with us is one polyglot. He is an Italian, and he's so versed in so many languages. And I was like, wow, how is this man able to manage to learn these so many languages? So I decided to have him here today to tell us all the secrets about how he can manage to learn 6 good languages as a person. Wow. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Dax. Yeah, but there are not so many after all. I speak 6 languages, but thank you very much. That was very flattering.
You call 6 not many?
Well,
Wow.
you see, I know I see some people that can speak something like 10, 15, even 20 or 25. So I consider 6 not so many, actually. Yes.
Oh, wow. I see. So can you introduce yourself to us?
Yes, of course, with pleasure. Well, my name is Andrea. I was born in Italy, as Dax said, and yeah, I speak 6 languages, including Italian. So actually, speak 5 foreign languages. I lived in China for 5 years, and then traveled back and forth for work, as they say, 出差, for 7 more years. So I had to do with China for 12 years of my life, and I still, of course, have Chinese friends and people with whom I have interactions with, of course, but I lived in China for 12 years. So this is then in 2017 I came back to Europe, definitely. Stopped working with China and started working here in Europe. I work as a copywriter right now, so I'm a digital nomad, so to say. I've decided to work in a way that allows me to just use a laptop and be anywhere in the world. At the moment, I am in Berlin. So this is it. Yeah, not so much to say. I mean, I do not want to take it too long. My introduction
Wow.
is
Yeah, interesting. So, apart from Italian, what was the first language you learned apart from
yeah,
Italian?
I speak English, Spanish, German, Russian, and Chinese.
Wow. When was the first time you started learning Chinese language?
I started learning Chinese at university because I was 19 years old. I decided after high school I decided to go to university and study languages, Far East languages, and the choice fell on Chinese because I was interested in that. And together with Chinese, I started also studying Russian. But I studied 5 years at university in Venice. So and
Yeah.
so, the quality of the study was not very good, but it allowed me to arrive in China in 2005 and sort of started. I could start to real learn Chinese with the bases I had made in the Italian university. So was I can't say it was wasted time, but yeah, I was 19 years old. At university, I started learning Chinese.
Wow. Interesting. You said you were interested in Chinese. For me, I was never interested in Chinese until even when I came to China, I was never interested until I was told I have to pass my HSK before I
I
can
see.
graduate successfully. So that made me interested in learning the language. I had no option. But for you, what made you interested?
Okay, so this is a little complicated. At the time, when I decided to study Chinese, I had always been fascinated by Eastern Asia, especially
Yeah.
Japan, to be frank. And at the time, I was practicing Japanese martial arts. So my idea was to go to a Far East and study martial arts. So I wanted to study a Far Eastern language. But
Okay.
Japan was already very well developed, and I thought they will never need anyone who speaks the language. So let's look around Japan in the neighborhoods and find something. And of course, the Chinese was the obvious choice because, first of all, Chinese has a very rich martial arts culture, and they were a developing market at the time. So it provided both a cultural interest and a potentiality for future jobs. This is the reason why I chose Chinese.
Wow, interesting. So you first considered the opportunities that
Yeah,
Chinese could
yeah,
bring.
exactly. First, I considered the opportunities. Exactly.
Wow. What are those opportunities you considered? Because I remember me growing up, I didn't see China as any country with opportunities. I only knew Chinese movies, kung fu, and that. I didn't see that much as opportunities.
The reasoning behind this was this. I thought, okay, Chinese people are a lot. So there's an enormous market, and they were starting to develop their economy. It was, remember, it was 1999, so
Yes.
it was no, sorry, 1997. So
Yes.
they had just started. It was not the very beginning. So some news came to the West. We already knew that China was moving, so to say. And I basically I bet on this, and was my reasoning. I bet on this to be right, and I was right.
Wow. You could reason in those days that China can
Yeah,
develop, because I think China was not that developed at that time.
I know, but this is what I thought, and it's obvious that I was lucky, so to say. I guessed right.
Wow, interesting. W- That is so interesting. I never had something like that. So, Chinese language has been one of the most difficult, among one of the most difficult languages in the world.
Well,
So,
yeah, it's difficult, yes.
yes, how was it when you started learning?
It was a nightmare. I remember, first of all, I have to say that the university where I started studying Chinese taught it very badly. There were a couple of good teachers. I remember particularly a Chinese teacher from Beijing who taught us in the following years. But at the
Yes,
beginning, the teachers were very, very bad. They were there only because they were Chinese, but they did not have any capacity to transmit the language. They were not able to. They had no didactic knowledge. So it was very difficult because of this, and because of the language itself. Because of course you had to deal with a language that has some features we don't have in Europe. First of all, the
yeah,
tone. I mean,
okay,
we have tones, but not on the syllable. We have tones on the words, on the sentence. And in Sweden, in Swedish, they have a couple of tones. I learned. They told me. I'm not sure, but not as complicated and as important as in Chinese. And then, of course, you have the writing system, which is very complicated. I mean, you have to remember a lot of things because
yeah,
the tones are about training your ears and your mouth, and the characters are difficult for other reasons. And then
yes,
third thing, grammar. The Chinese grammar is relatively simple, but is very, very, very different from any European language grammar. So
language.
that was a very three serious obstacles I had to overtake to start to understand and learn Chinese.
Wow, interesting. You face these obstacles. So why it didn't discourage you?
Well, I suppose I had made a choice, and yeah, I was there. Okay, I don't like the idea of giving up. First of all, so
Yeah,
but the thing is, I was there. I was at university, and I really believed in what I told you before, the opportunities that China might provide. And I thought,
yes,
well, the fact that the language is difficult is a further opportunity because fewer people will learn Chinese than people learning, for example, Spanish or German or even Russian. So
yes,
I transformed this, I suppose, into encouragement and not discouragement.
yeah.
And I thought, okay, it's a language, it's a human language. I'm a human being, it can be learned. It's as easy as that. It doesn't matter how long I will take to do that, but I will learn it.
Wow, interesting. I personally, I came to China in 2018, and I reached at a point I wanted to give up. It was so hard for me until my Chinese friend took me to his village, and I realized how loving Chinese were. They cared for me. We were using Google Translate to communicate, and they had time for me. So from that point, I realized that if I'm able to speak the language, it can create many opportunities for me.
Yeah.
So that really motivated me to start learning the language. Can you say that before anybody would learn Chinese language, they should know why they are learning the language?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you if you start doing anything and you do not know why you're doing it, it's highly probable that you will give up, because as soon as you get to your first obstacle, your
Yes.
if you don't have a strong why, as they say, you will give up. Of course, yeah. I would say that if you want to learn a language as Chinese, as complicated and as rich of challenges as Chinese is for any person speaking a Western language, I can speak of that. Of course, I do not know
Yes.
any African language, no South American languages, so native. But if you want to start learning such a complicated and rich of challenges language, you have to have a strong why. Absolutely. There must be a
Okay.
very good reason to do that.
Wow.
It can be the interest in culture. That's a good reason for me. But you have to be convinced.
Wow. Interesting. Those watching live here today, we are connected with one polyglot. He's an Italian and he can speak 6 languages. And today he's coming to tell us how he was able to learn one of the most difficult languages, Chinese and other languages as well. Interesting. If you have any question, you can comment in the comment section. If you have any question, you can also join through live. I'll be sending a link where you can join this live and ask any question that you want. Interesting. To continue, can you tell us some of the reasons why people should learn Chinese language? You had an intercultural interest. What are some other?
Okay. Well, I actually cannot really speak for other people, but I think for myself, the reasons why, apart from the cultural interest, I mean, the cultural interest is a quite strong point for me. Another thing is the reason why you should learn any language at all. That's to know different people, to open your mind. Because, well, what languages did to me, they open doors to different worlds, to different cultures, different ways of seeing the world. And after a while, you realize that actually, although all these differences are real and present, they are just superficial. That we are all human beings, that there is no real difference apart from, of course, difference maybe in aesthetics or in the way we speak. So the reason why a very deep and profound reason why you should learn any language, and in this case Chinese, is to reconnect yourself to human beings.
Yes. Wow. Interesting. This reminds me of one of legend Nelson Mandela's quote. He said, "If you speak to a man in a language he understands, it goes to his head. But if you speak to a man in his own language, it goes to his heart." So, meaning with languages, we can really stay connected to people. And
Absolutely, yes.
yeah, and personally, from my experience, when I started learning Chinese language coming to China, I could see how I got it opened so many opportunities for me. I could see how I got connected to so many Chinese culture and so many things that I was connected to China because of the languages. Could you say in this modern world, in this century, learning Chinese language can create opportunities, and that should be a why for some people?
Well, Dax, I don't really. I mean, the thing is that okay, learning a language is an opportunity in itself, because, as we said, you have the chance to know different people. So this is an opportunity. If we're talking about economic opportunity, I mean jobs, I don't know.
Yeah.
Frankly, I don't know, because it's a long time since I last came to China, and China has changed a lot since I last time was there. So I don't know how the market is. The job market has evolved, and I do not know how their development is going. So
Yes.
wouldn't dare saying that learning Chinese could be useful as far as a job opportunity, especially now that there are so many good translators, and so many Chinese people speak English. I would say that if you want to learn a language, Chinese, my opinion,
Yes.
start from a cultural point of view. Imagine if you need to learn Chinese because you want to work in China. That's anyway. It's a good idea because it will make your life easier and much better and much more meaningful. It doesn't make, even if Chinese people can speak English sometimes, and I suppose more than before, the fact that you speak them, as you said, in their own language, will help you create better connections. But I'm not able to say that learning Chinese language can bring new opportunities. I do not know.
Wow, interesting. I love that answer. But I personally, I still think learning Chinese language can create opportunities. I personally, I came to China as a pharmacy student. I didn't learn, I just learned Chinese language as a course within the first 2 years. And that Chinese language has created more opportunities, jobs, and other stuff for me as compared to the main major that I came to China.
Oh,
So for me personally, I can say Chinese language can create opportunities for several people in other countries, in your country or in China or anywhere. Let's talk about how did you manage to learn Chinese language? You said you faced obstacles. The teachers were no good and everything. How?
okay. So the thing is, I really learned Chinese when I was in China, of course, not in Italy, and there were dark moments, so to say. There were moments in which I thought I'm not learning anything. I went to school every day because I attended a 2 semesters course in Beijing at Beijing Language and Culture University. I went to school every day and I studied every afternoon. So I also had a social life, of course. The only thing I would say that I really did was I went on. I did not give up. I continued and I was disciplined, so to say. I'm because I really wanted to learn it. So I even when I felt that I was not learning as much as I should have been,
Yes.
I decided simply to go on and to go on doing what I was doing, and eventually it worked. There is no really secret sauce. It's just you have to do things. Once you found a method to learn language that works for you, because there are many methods. Some people learn a lot with the grammar. Some others learn a lot on the street. Once you found your method, um, just go on, and it will give you the results you want if you give it enough time.
Wow, it needs enough time. Interesting. You learned Chinese language after coming to China, even though you started learning in Italy. So, can we say that nobody can learn Chinese unless they come to China?
Well, this was my case, but I say that now, at the time, no, impossible. Now I think they could learn Chinese even staying in their own home because if they can't go to China because sometimes you don't have the money, to go. Okay, let's put it like this. If you want to learn a language, the best way is to engage in a course in the place where the language is spoken. Because once you get out of the classroom, you hear everybody speaking the language. So you learn faster, you learn better things, you learn more quality language and real language. But
Yes.
if you don't have the money to go to the country and you still want to learn the language, now with the internet, you have a lot of opportunities. A really lot of opportunities because there's plenty of teachers from all over the world and very good ones, and you can be taught by them. You can study with them through
Yes.
internet, for example, through applications like the one we're using right now.
Yes.
And so many teachers provide so many different angles from which to study a language. So I think if you can go to China, absolutely. If you cannot, don't worry. You can learn the language anyway, and then you
Wow.
will you will go to China when you want, when you can.
Wow. Interesting. I personally, I before coming to China, I never thought I could learn Chinese language. And coming to China, I could see that I always respect people who are able to learn Chinese language outside China because it's very hard. But in China, you have that environment where most of them are speaking the language, and it's so easy for you to learn the language and understand it more better. You
Yeah,
said you never gave up in learning the language, and you were able to manage? What are some of the methods that kept you going
Oh,
in
okay.
order to learn the language?
Well, one of the things I usually do is repetition. Okay, this one is very difficult, but I say it anyways because I started watching Chinese films and see dramas from the beginning. I couldn't understand a word, but I started watching. I watched them every day, nonetheless, and it took me months before I started understanding something, and I still kept on watching Chinese drama and film all day long, not all day long, in the afternoon. And another thing I did was repetition. For example, well, you want to master Chinese writing. I mean, now we have computers and phones. We don't have to write by hand, but at the time we didn't have that. So I'm talking about 2005. So we didn't have smartphones, and there were electronic dictionaries, but still, it was not the same. And Chinese phones had the pinyin input system, but still had to learn how to write Chinese characters. I just
Yeah.
repeated them every day. Every day, not all the characters I knew every day, but I kept on repeating the characters. Now, I haven't written in Chinese for a long time, so I don't really remember how to write most of the times. But
Mm.
I plan on refreshing up my Chinese in the following months. But still, two things: repetition and of the characters, and enhancing the linguistic environment. I mean, I was in China, so everybody spoke
Yeah.
Chinese around me, anyways. But even when I was at home, I put on Chinese films and try to understand from the images and something. Even though I didn't understand, I kept on watching them.
Wow.
These are the two
Interesting.
things I think that, well, were different from what other students do, I think.
Wow. Interesting. So currently, you mentioned the method you used in 2005, but
Yeah.
currently, if somebody wants to learn, what are the best method you tell them to use? Because, and I know you also teach others how to learn Chinese, right?
Yeah, well, languages in general, not only Chinese. Yes, okay. This is a very important thing. I cannot say which are the best methods because it depends on the person, depends on the language, and depends on key factors. I would say that a good rule of thumb, so to say, is to create a linguistic environment while you're studying with your method, be it real life sentences or study grammar or reading, whatever it is. A good thing to do is to create, even if you're not in China or wherever, a linguistic environment. For example, the moment I'm studying German, and I have my phone set in German language. As I said, I watch films and series and documentaries in German basically every day, as I did with Chinese. So this thing of the linguistic environment is to get input in the language you want to learn as much as possible, all day long, be it through music, be it through films, be it through books. If you can read, please read, absolutely read. It's, of course, to read in Chinese is a challenge in its own, but this is one thing I think works for everybody because the passive input works for everybody. Then how to work on that passive input is different from, you can decide to look for words or not look for words and just understand out of the context, or do both. But passive input all day long is a very good thing, I think.
Wow. Passive input and creating that linguistic environment.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. When we talk about learning Chinese language, how can you explain to somebody about Chinese language for a person's first time?
Oh. Okay, it depends on I do not really, I do not know how I would start to say something like this because, but it depends on which person I have in front of me. If it's a person who speaks Italian, I would just tell them, well, let's say this would work for everyone.
Yeah.
Uh, Forget your own language. Don't think you can translate from your own language into Chinese. They
Okay.
are two different things. As actually, this works for any language, not only for Chinese. But
Okay.
we tend, when we start learning a language, we tend to do this. We have this process. We tend to try to say the sentence as we would say it in our own language using the words of the language we're studying, which is always wrong because even when it is very similar, it's never a good idea to translate. If you start speaking from the very scratch with the few words you have, it's much better. It will create a sort of flexibility that when you have more complex words, you will be able to use them. But when you don't, you will become able to explain complicated things with simple sentences. And
Yeah.
this creates this linguistic flexibility that it is very helpful. But the main important thing is it's useless to translate from your own language into Chinese because the two languages work in a completely different manner. So this is actually the first thing I would say. Forget your own language.
Yeah. Wow. Forget your own language. So in learning Chinese language, I know they are in different parts. We have speaking, we have characters and everything. Would you like to explain that detail about the Chinese language?
Which details? Sorry.
Details as in Chinese language have tones.
Oh yeah, but
They,
well, sorry. I thought that your audience was already into this. No, okay. Chinese language has tones. This means that in Chinese there are something like 215 syllables, more or less. Possible syllable 14, and some of them are actually, and some words are pronounced with the same syllable but with a different tone. For example, the very first example we learn is that ma means mother. Well, when we say ma, it means horse. And this difference, if you don't speak Chinese, you don't study Chinese, you probably haven't heard the difference in the two syllables. But ma
yeah.
with a high pitched tone is mother. Ma with it's called a third tone, with a tone that goes down and then comes up, is horse. And then there is also ma, which means how do you translate that in English? Opium, not it's not,
Horse.
well, it's also opium, but and
Yeah.
then means ma, which means to insult. So these are the four main tones of Mandarin Chinese, and
Yeah.
they use them all in every word basically. There are also two half tones, and if you speak with the wrong tone, well, it might cause some interpretation problems. Even though I have to say that if I speak with the wrong tone, they don't understand me. But if Chinese people speak with the wrong tone, they understand them. I do not know how it's possible, but this is what will happen. And my tones are almost perfect. So I don't say it because I want to excuse myself for not speaking correctly. No, I've been recognized as a very good at tones. But I remember that the first time they see me is they see a face that is not Chinese. They appear to be closing themselves. No, I cannot understand what you say. It happened to me a lot of times. I had to tell them sometimes, don't you understand Mandarin? And then, oh, and then they realized that I was actually speaking their language. So
Yeah.
I guess that when you speak in Chinese and you are a foreigner, you have to be perfect. Otherwise, there is already an element of complexity for them. They can't understand why are you speaking Chinese? You don't look Chinese. I
Yeah.
suppose that now in big cities it is not like this anymore, but it was at the beginning. Even remember there were taxi drivers, and I understand them, poor things. They wouldn't take us if we couldn't speak Chinese because
Really?
our way of saying the address was completely wrong. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes they just say, no, 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 like that. So this is the
Wow.
thing of the tone. Sorry, it is that every syllable in Chinese is pronounced with according to four main tones plus two subtones, and this changes the meaning. This is the thing of tones. It's it's not the only tonal language, of course, and it's not the most complicated. Thai and the Cantonese have more tones than Mandarin, so
Yeah.
it can be learned. I repeat, it can be learned. It's a difficult feature, but it can be learned.
Wow, interested. For me, before even learning Chinese language, I didn't know much about a language having tones. So if this is somebody's first time to learn languages, you should know Chinese language, as he has explained, has tones. The tone of how you mention a word will have different meanings altogether. And we have listening. How can you can also listen and understand the tones and writing characters
Okay,
and
so
reading characters.
understanding the tones is easier than saying them, actually,
Yeah.
because I remember at the beginning I wasn't able to pronounce a particular combination of tones, which was a third tone followed by a second tone.
Yeah.
And I had my Chinese friend of mine in front of me, and I kept on repeating this a couple of words, and he said wrong, 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 and I couldn't hear it, so I couldn't hear myself. But when I heard him saying it, I recognized it. So this means that actually recognizing passive knowledge of a language is always easier.
Yes.
So to understand the tones, the thing to do is to listen a lot, do a lot of
Yeah.
listening, and to this purpose, the thing I said before about watching films works very well. About writing, writing is just well, it's simple, but it's not easy to understand Chinese writing. You have to practice it. You have to write characters and study new ones and keep on practicing, keep on writing, because as soon as you stop doing that, as I did, you forget even the most simple ones.
Yeah.
This is really no secret. The only thing to you might ask yourself, why should I learn how to write since now we don't even need to write by hand? That's a good
Yeah.
question. Actually, I don't have an answer for you. I want to know how to write, and I can't find at the moment the time to do that. So
Yeah.
it's true. You can survive without being able to write. I mean, then you can check on your phone. Absolutely, no
Yeah.
problem. If you have to sign something or write something when you have to fill in some paperwork. But I think paperwork doesn't exist anymore in China. I think now
Yeah.
they use only tablet
Software.
and screen
Yes.
softwares. Exactly. So there is no real need to learn how to write, but you have to learn how to
Correct.
read. This is important.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. I'm very happy you mentioned that. I personally, I only learned how to write because I needed that to write exams. But for now, I
Oh yeah,
think if you are learning Chinese language, now the world has changed, and the only thing you need is to being able to speak and also understand, listen and understand, and also recognize the characters so that you
yeah,
can type on your software. I think, as you said, there's no need of learning how to write the characters. If you can recognize them, then it will be so easy and so fast to learn the language. You mentioned you created linguistic environment. You never gave up in China when you were learning the language. What are some of the other things you did in China in order to learn the language?
Okay, one thing I do, but this is me, is well, the thing. If you are a language learner, you already know it. If you don't, if you're not a language learner, I would just say the language you learn in a classroom is the basis, but it's a language that basically nobody speaks. What's and nobody writes actually. So another thing I did, I remember, I was very interested in signs on the streets. I saw the
Mm,
characters on the sign, so I looked for a character. Now it's
yeah,
easier because I have a phone. At the time, I had to write them down and then go back home and look in the dictionary, a paper
yeah,
dictionary.
yeah,
And I understood that signs can be a very interesting source of new vocabulary and new expressions. For example, there is this, we learned in classroom that the way to say no and negate in Chinese is either bu or
yeah,
meyo, and then imperative, yeah. But when you go to any Chinese place, you will also learn another one, which is wu, which is a formal way of saying yeah. So it's an imperative negation. And I
yeah,
learned this not in my classroom. I learned it on the streets because I kept on looking at signs. And then you also, for example, in supermarkets, watch the signs
yeah,
in supermarkets. You will learn the names of fruits and vegetables, and that's worth knowing because I mean
yes,
it happens to talk about food. It's a common topic, and it's absolutely useful if you want to buy things.
mhm,
So this is one thing to sum it up. One thing I would do is when you walk on the streets, observe
yes,
observe a lot of the written things and also listen to people speaking, listen to what they say when they meet each other, listen to what they say when they part. That
yeah,
that's actually very 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 useful. And and it's a passive way of you don't have to be particularly active in this. A little
Yeah.
bit, yes, of course, but it's not so difficult. You don't have to put down and do the work. You just have to walk and observe, walk and listen. For example, this is another thing.
Wow, that's so powerful. That is one thing I also noticed when I started learning Chinese language, because I realized that most of the things I learn in book is totally different from what they say actually. So that is so powerful. And if you are thinking of learning Chinese or any language, I think is almost the same. What is in the book is totally different from what they speak as natives. Wow, that's so powerful point that I love. What are some of the opportunities? No, did Chinese language create some opportunities for you when you were in China?
Yes, it did. At the beginning, I was my first job in China was in Hangzhou, and I got it just because I spoke Chinese. Because this person, he was an Italian entrepreneur. He had this
Yeah,
company, and he was dealing with Chinese factories. He had three Chinese employees, but one of them also spoke Italian, by the way. But he wanted someone from Italy because he had some trust issues, to be frank.
yeah,
So he preferred to have someone from Italy who spoke the language decently, because at that time my Chinese was not very very good.
yeah.
I was afraid of making phone calls, I remember. And so this was the first opportunity. Then this started a chain of events that brought me to work in Guangdong for 2 years and a
Wow,
half through different connections. But yeah, absolutely. And then also I was in an airport in Shanghai, a city in southern China. And some people heard me speaking Chinese, and well, eventually I started working with them for 6 to 12 months. So yeah, it did bring some opportunities. Absolutely, yes.
wow. So, what advice will you give to anyone in China who is not having the interest to learn Chinese language?
Well, I have to say something very strong at this point. I'm sorry, but this is exactly what I think. If you live in a country, you have been living in a country for years, and you don't speak the language, shame on you. Shame on you, because you are a guest of that. And this is something I see everywhere. I know
Yeah,
people living here in Germany that don't speak German, have been living here for 12 years. I repeat, shame on you. This country is giving you to something to do, obviously, because otherwise you wouldn't be here for 12 years, right?
yeah.
And you are not so even grateful enough to learn the language of the people that are hosting you. This is something I find very, very, very bad. So learn the language. This is what I would say. Just it. As a sign of gratefulness to the people that are hosting you and giving you something to eat and giving you a job to do and giving you the life you're leading right now, even if you don't like it. But the thing is, it's just a matter of respect. You're living in somebody else's home, and I really don't understand people who don't learn the language of the country they live in.
Wow,
People say they don't have time. This is sorry, bullshit. Bullshit. You don't need much. You can study 1 hour per day, and if you don't have 1 hour per day, you have a problem with your life, not with languages. So, but you can study 1 hour per day, and you will become proficient in any language in some years. So, study a language. Stop bullshitting yourself and procrastinating. Study a language.
wow. I'm so happy you have been so frank and so open about this, because I can really relate that I have several people in China who are enjoying so many opportunities here. As you said, they have jobs, better opportunities, and better offers in China, yet they don't like the language. And that is very strange, as you said, a sign of gratefulness.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that point. I love that point so much. Interesting. Thank you for being so open about
Oh well, you're welcome.
about the language. Before we even leave to other languages, you said you can speak all other languages as well. What
Yes.
motivated you to learn other languages as well?
Well, the thing is, still the fact that I mentioned before about doors opening, and well, apart from the fact that I can't really explain, but I love languages. I like being able to express myself in another language. I like the idea of understanding people speaking a language that is not my own. But I do think that they are doors to open. They open on different worlds, and they can transform your vision of the world. You see, I in Italy, many people have a very closed vision of what the world is, and I heard a lot of stereotypes about a lot of countries, and
Yeah,
eventually, well, I just mentioned again Germany,
yeah,
especially about German. The idea of the Italian has of German people is that they are closed-minded, they are not fun, they eat shit and stuff like that, and this is a wrong idea. It's completely wrong. There is nothing of these stereotypes that actually is true. Not even the good ones, the precision of German people. No, they are not so precise as people think. They are just human beings, as we all are. So here in Germany, you have the same things you have anywhere else in the world, more or less, of course. So this is I discovered this through learning a language, through being here, and this reconciled me, as I said before, with the idea that we are all one. There is no real difference. I mean, there is no real difference that is worth of significance that comes from different culture. We're just
yeah.
human beings. So this is the main philosophical reason why now I'm interested in learning languages.
Wow, interesting. So as you said, the languages can really make us open-minded and make
Yes,
us connected to other world. How
absolutely.
is the feeling that you can speak so many languages? I remember when I started learning how to speak little Chinese, I was like, I feel so proud, and I feel like, how is the feeling for you that you can speak so
I,
many
I, I
languages?
actually I cannot describe it because every now and then I realize that well, you should see my phone feed. I have chats in all the languages, and I finish a sentence in Russian with a friend, and then I start speaking Spanish with another, and it's actually I do not know. I can't describe it. It's actually I feel, of course, I'm proud of myself. Absolutely, this is I'm really happy of what I've reached so far, and I want more of this. The feeling is that I'm happy, but I want more.
Wow, interesting. I also have that feeling too. Always been happy. Those who have joined live and watching live now, if you want to ask any question about learning Chinese language or other languages, you can join this live through the link I've shared. You can just click on that link to join the live to ask any question. You can also comment in the comment section if you have any question from the conversations we have so far. You can ask that, and anything bothering you about learning Chinese language or other languages, we have our coach and our expert here, and he can guide us. Wow, interesting. So if somebody wants to learn any of these languages you can speak, can you teach them or can you assist them?
No, I actually cannot teach the languages themselves. I helped a couple of people learn English, but I'm not a language teacher. I'm more of a language coach. So I can tell you how to set your priorities, how to find the time to learn the language, how to develop the correct mindset, and of course, some methods that can help you learn the language. But I don't think I can teach a language. I've never, I mean, I'm not very proud of the result. I can't say proud. I'm not very satisfied with the two or three experiences I had with a couple of kids. One is 11 years old, the other one is 14, and they are my cousin's sons. And I realized that if I was not able to strategize a path to have them learn English with the material they had. Truth be said, I also was a sort of support teacher, so I did not want to give them too much weight. They already had their school teachers, and I did not want to add pressure on them. I wanted this to be
Yeah.
something fun. But the thing is, I cannot structure a course in a single language. I can structure a way to start and go on learning any language. This is something different. So not language teacher, yes, language coach.
Wow, I never really thought about that. So is there a big difference between being a coach and a teacher?
Yeah, you see, the thing is that a language coach works. Okay, a language teacher should be also a language coach. That would be the perfect thing. But the language coach basically is the part of teaching a language that deals with the mindset, habits, and methods, so to say. While a language teacher basically teaches language and grammar, exercises, and reading things and stuff like that. So the two are different in the thing that the language coach basically deals with the abstract aspect of learning language, while a language teacher, whereas a language teacher does exactly that, teaches the language. But as I said, a language teacher should be a language coach. This is something I was discussing with a language teacher friend of mine, an English teacher friend of mine, that asked me for advice. I mean, he's an English teacher, and he asked me for advice. So, and then we were talking about that. The fact that many teachers are not language coaches as well is a problem, because you have to language coaches that person that allows the student to find their discipline, to find their way of doing a thing, even when they think they don't have time, even when they think they want to give up. So these are the things that language coaching deals with. And of course, if you teach a language, you should be able to do these things, because it makes your work better. But not many teachers are also coaches.
Wow. So interesting. I never really thought about having a language coach and a language teacher. But as you mentioned, it's really very important. Sometimes even I feel like you need the coach. I needed the coach more than the teacher when I started learning Chinese language.
I agree, and I think, for example, I actually I will push as far as to say that you can learn a language on your own these days. So you don't really need a language teacher, because you find material anywhere, but you might be in need of a language coach. Of course, if you learn a language on your own, you probably are already motivated enough and disciplined enough, and you don't need the language coach either. But yes, this is what I find.
Wow, interesting. That's so powerful, because I personally, from my experience, I needed that coaching, that mindset. It was that mindset that really motivated me to start learning the language. And I think most of them, I learned them on my own as compared to a teacher teaching me. So that is so powerful, something I never really thought. If you want to learn a language, first get a coach. And we have one of our coaches here, Andrea. He can speak 6 languages, and he can coach you in learning any language, especially the 6 languages he can speak. Wow,
Yeah, of course.
interesting. How can somebody reach you in case they want to
Oh, they can find me
contact
on
you for any?
Instagram, for example. My handle is the hiking polyglot, and yeah, basically on Instagram I usually speak about languages. So other channels, I'm also on LinkedIn, but on LinkedIn I speak about copywriting and in Italian. So on Instagram I'm both in Italian and in English. So if anybody's interested, and I have a blog which I haven't written for a while, but it's the hiking polyglot .eu/blog, and that's it. Yeah, these are the two channels through which someone can reach me.
Wow. I'll share a link of his Instagram or in the description box. If you want to reach him, you can reach him, and he will coach you very well. In fact, I've learned so many things I didn't know. How has learning Chinese language impacted your life? Flashing me.
Oh, wow, it transformed it completely. I regard the decision to study Chinese one of the most important of my life, but because it once again I have to use this expression. It set things in motion that revolutionized my life. So first of all, I learned Chinese, and while I was in Italy, nothing changed really. But when I moved to China, First of all, I learned the language properly in China, but then I started meeting people from all over the world, and I developed an interest also in other languages, even though I already had it. But I started working in China, so it really impacted my life a lot. Oh, of course, I started studying Chinese Kung Fu, even if I don't practice it anymore, but I went on with that for years. So it really changed a lot of aspects of my life. I do not know. I mean, I can't say what I would have done without Chinese because I didn't. So it's something that it didn't happen. But I might have probably remained in Italy my whole life, and that would have been a pity.
Wow, interesting. When I watch you in several videos, I was like, wow, I just want to be like you.
You make my face red. You make me blush now.
For real, the way you could speak Chinese, because you've left China for a while now,
Oh yeah.
and your Chinese is very fluent. I am currently in China, but I was like, what? I have to start learning HSK5 now. The way you were speaking really motivated me to take the language more serious. And
Oh, thank you. I'm very happy that worked. I'm very happy, Dax. That makes me really happy. What you're saying it's flattering,
wow,
and thank you.
wow, you mentioned about learning Chinese language and learning Kung Fu.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. I personally have been in China, and before even coming to China, I thought every Chinese knew Kung Fu. I came to China, I
Yeah.
realized
The Italians think that too. Yes.
even even just 1% of the native Chinese can do this Kung Fu. How did you start that Kung Fu?
Well, it was really actually. This is now that you mention it. It was at the beginning. It was a problem. I couldn't find a proper teacher. I mean, I found teachers, but they were selling something they were not really able to do. And so I changed to many of them, and I was not satisfied. But I kept on looking. I kept on looking. I kept on looking. And finally found. I remember once, for example, I was in Hangzhou. I had a couple of teachers in Beijing, but I left Beijing and I was living in Hangzhou. So I decided to try to find a teacher in Hangzhou, and I went at 5 o'clock. I went to the only park I knew, and I couldn't find any. There was no, there was no one there training, and so I just kept on looking. It's just as with the language, you don't give up. You keep on. You ask people,
Yeah,
and they introduce you to someone, and maybe that someone is not as good as you want, but you have a point from which to start. So it was at the beginning. It was a little bit difficult.
wow, interesting. In fact, I have to ask this.
Please.
How are you able to maintain that language skill and the Kung Fu even after leaving China for a while? I know several people who has already forgotten the Chinese after 1 year leaving China.
Okay. This is a good question, actually. The thing is that I never stopped uh, looking for input and for occasions to practice the language. So I don't study actively Chinese at the moment because I'm focused on German. I will start studying actively study Chinese later on this year. I have this plan.
Yeah.
But I never stopped. For example, as soon as I found some Chinese people, I always try to speak to them. And of course, most of the times you only get the chance to say always the same sentences. Oh, you speak about Chinese? Oh, why? Yeah, you tell them I live in China, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes no. Sometimes it doesn't happen like that. Sometimes they keep on, and you find interesting people. For example, on Instagram, I found this 27-year-old Chinese guy that lives in Turin, in Italy. He studies in Italy, and we met a couple of times. He's a very well-educated person, so he speaks Italian. So it's, for example, a nice connection to practice my Chinese. And well, we exchange messages once a week or something like that. So just don't let chances to use the language go. This is what I would say if you're outside.
Yeah.
And every now and then, of course, you will have to fresh up your language. So do something actively if you don't want to lose it. But
Yes.
first, start not letting chances of speaking the language slip.
Wow, that's so interesting. We shouldn't miss that chances.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think you, the environment you found yourself, you had several Chinese around probably.
Well,
How
yeah,
about,
not
yeah,
several, but yeah, some.
yeah, but how about people where there will be no Chinese there, or people who cannot speak Chinese?
There is no place in the world where there is no Chinese. You come from Ghana, you should know that. No, no, Chinese people are everywhere. So, yeah, there is no risk of that.
Oh wow, that was a smart one. Interesting. Wow. I've really learned a lot about this language learning. And if anybody needs coaching, you really need coaching before you learn any kind of languages. Among all the 6 languages that you can speak, which is the most difficult to you?
I don't know because I really, if I had to judge the difficulty of a language in the amount of time it's taking to me to learn it, I would say German. I'm not
Yeah.
satisfied with German, but it's not, of course, it's not the most difficult language for me. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just that I'm not putting out the effort I should be putting, probably.
Yeah.
Or so I think Chinese and Russian first place together.
Wow, interesting. Before we even add to this session, I've learned a lot, but I would love to ask some questions which is a little bit out of the language learning.
Please.
Before
Any
coming to China, what are some of the stereotypes you had as an Italian?
about Chinese? I have to say that I had almost none. The stereotypes about Chinese people, I learned the stereotypes about Chinese later on when I was in China. For example, the fact that I don't know, they are not very clean, which is not true. And the fact that they spit all the time, which is true. This, especially in outer cities, not in Beijing anymore, but I lived in Shantou, for example, and that is absolutely
Yeah.
true. But I did not have real stereotypes in about Chinese people in when I was in Italy because I had already dismounted them at university. I hadn't met some, and they told us, "No, this is not true. This is, for example, this one you said about kung fu. It's not true that all
Yeah.
Chinese people know kung fu. Actually, it's quite the opposite. There's so many people in China that know nothing about Chinese martial arts that think that
Yeah.
what we see in films is real, and it's really strange, but." So I have to say that let's be uh, honest. I either had none or I don't remember them. I really don't remember the stereotypes I had about China. I
Mm.
was nonetheless, I have to say something. I was not shocked. I did not have any cultural shock. Surprised, yes. Sometimes irritated, yes, of course, but
Yeah.
not shocked.
Wow. Interesting. For me, coming from Ghana to China, I was so surprised about the developmental infrastructure in China, and with road buildings and everything, delivery system, the technology in China.
Yes.
I don't know. Did you have something like that as in Italian?
No, okay. In Italy, we are not as advanced as they are now, but they were not always like this because, of course, when I first arrived in China, they were not. But when I left China, they had already started this technological revolution, and I found it amazing. Frankly, there were some things that were really really interesting. For example, well, I tell you just I I learned that now not all restaurants, but many restaurants don't have waiters anymore. They have these robots. And
Yeah.
for a person that doesn't speak the language properly, a robot might be helpful to order things. It's not helpful to learn the language. This is because if you speak with a waiter and you understand each other, that's
Yeah.
a good thing.
Yeah.
But the last time I went to China, I had problems paying cash,
Yeah.
which is a goodish thing, but that's a political thing for me. But the thing is, the problem was at the time that
Yeah.
they only had WeChat and Alipay accounts with Chinese banks. So no foreigner could actually pay in other way but cash, because they wouldn't accept our credit cards. So
Yeah.
we had some problems. The last time I was there, when I had to buy something on the street, because they had a 100 RMB note and nobody had
Yeah.
changed. So that was, but this is actually a good thing. Now even foreigners with foreign bank accounts, I hear, can
Yeah.
create a WeChat Pay and Alipay account. So this is very comfortable. Very, you don't have to bring your money with you. You don't have to be afraid of being robbed and stuff like that, which is nice, I think.
Wow, interesting. Those who are watching live today, we are joined with one Italian polyglot. He is very good at so many languages, and we have talked so much about how to learn Chinese language and how he was able to learn Chinese language. If you have any question about learning languages, you can comment in the comment section and you can ask or join this live with the link to ask your question. You mentioned Italy is not as advanced as SAD now. That is surprising to me. Why do you say that?
Well, it's just that the Italians are not so fond of technology as the Chinese are. I mean, there are some things, yes, of course, they are developed, but we still have waiters in restaurants. And to be quite frank, I prefer it this way. I mean, I wouldn't like to order my things to a robot. There are some places that have the robots to take things to you,
Yeah,
but you still order things to people, for example. But then I don't know other things, but we can pay with our mobile phones here as well. But we still prefer credit cards or cash. Here in Germany, they still prefer cash everywhere, but it's
yeah,
because of taxes. Because if you cash money in cash, you can avoid declaring it or something like this. I'm not sure.
yeah.
So it's a matter of I think it's just a matter of relationship with technology. The Italians are not so, generally speaking, not
Yeah.
so fond of technology. Many old people find it difficult to use a smartphone properly, for example. So never, let alone to learn how to use a software to pay things. So it's a
Wow.
conservative state of mind, I think.
Wow. Interesting. In fact, I've really enjoyed this conversation and I love how you have been so open and telling us so many things. Before we even end this live, I would like to ask you what, as a coach, as a language coach, how do you coach me in 30 seconds or 1 minute as a beginner how to learn Chinese language?
How to learn Chinese language? I would actually elaborate on the thing I told you before. I would say, forget your own language. You are entering another world here. And what you should do is to never think of your own language when you start learning a new language. I know this sounds absurd at the moment, but you will understand. Just remember my words. Forget your own language. Start speaking in the new language from day one with just one word, but don't think of your own language. I would start like this. But actually, in reality, a coaching session works with questions. So usually, yes. Usually, the thing is that a coach asks question to let the necessities of the person emerge, and according to those necessities, we then start with a personalized program, so to say. But yeah,
Wow.
you asked me for a one-liner of sorts, so I just gave you that.
Wow. Interesting. Mr. Andrea, in fact, from my personal view and from this conversation, I certify you as an expert language coach. If
Thank you very
anybody
much. Thank you. Thank you, friend.
if anybody wants to reach you, they will reach you through Instagram, and I'll put a
Instagram the
link
best
of
way. Instagram the best way, absolutely.
comment session. Thank you very much for having us. And before we leave, tell us your last words before we leave.
Oh, I just want to thank you because it was a very kind and unexpected invitation, and I was very happy of being here.
Wow. Thank you so much for your time and for being open and sharing all these things with us. I've really enjoyed this, and in the future, I can't wait to have more conversations with you more about other languages and way of life and the job market and whatever in the
But
future.
we are friends on Instagram now, so you can contact me anytime you want.
Sure, sure, sure. So this is where time will permit us to end today's live. Hello, lovely people. So thank you very much for today's edition. If you want to learn Chinese language, then this video is meant for you. See you next time, where we'll be bringing special guests to teach you several things, especially about China, where we'll be having special guests who have lived in China several years, telling you about their stories living in China, starting a company in China, doing importation from China, everything about China, then this platform is meant for you. See you next time, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye bye.
Bye.